Tilta just introduced the Nucleus M2, a new generation of their super popular wireless follow focus system.
You're watching CineD, supported by B&H and CVP.
Hi guys, here from NAB 2025. We're here at the Tilta booth with Nick. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. So you guys actually just announced the successor of, I guess, what is one of your most popular products, the Nucleus M, right? Which has been around for a while. It's been used widely by a lot of productions all over the world. I see lots of people using it all the time. And I think it's come a long way with the version 2. So what's new?
Yeah, so this is the Nucleus M2. This is the successor to an 8-year-old system, and it's a lot of small little tweaks that we think have really improved the usability of this. The main one being all of the new screens for lens mapping. So you're going to have information in terms of seeing focus, iris, zoom, and a fourth motor, most often used for ND, but you could use it for a polarizer, any kind of special effect filter. And the idea is that you still have your main kind of screen for accessing different info, camera control, a lot of advanced lens profile settings, but then you also have an electronic focus marking disc. It's going to show you where the focus is set to on your lens, as well as your zoom and your iris, all from two pretty easy clutter-free screens. So the idea is to make this as kind of a one-stop system for someone who's still in the indie market, or maybe using this as a an option for certain size shoots, but giving them a bit more flexibility than the previous version, which a lot of people are taping up, adding the marks with the Sharpie, just a bit more professional system that I think would be easier to transition to if they're moving to a larger system in the future, kind of building that skill set on this, and then not losing any kind of momentum.
Where did you see the biggest shortcomings of the old system compared to the new one? Like, apart from the focus wheel, is there anything else where you guys said we need to improve on that based on the feedback that you got?
I think the limitation of the kind of software was definitely a factor. It was able to move the motors and kind of get you where you needed to be, but you didn't have a lot of control in terms of how, or I think the firmware in this is going to be a lot more usable in terms of connecting to different cameras through Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and just having different options for as cameras advance, kind of keeping up with the new system. I think the M originally is a pretty great and robust system, but it was one of our first systems, and so it is a bit rougher around the edges, a bit more heavy metal. Software is a bit more basic. So this is kind of the, one of like the biggest refreshes we've done, but I think it's kind of built on everything Tilta has done in the past, and I think we have, grown a lot in our design and our kind of, building of these systems, and the M2 is taking full advantage of all of that.
So lots more electronics, a lot more screens here. What additional abilities do the screens actually give me?
So mostly seeing the information of where your lenses are. Similar to the Nano 2, which did make some leaps in terms of camera control, you do have camera control options, meaning if you do have your camera rigged up somewhere out of reach, or even using it on a gimbal where you don't want to be manually poking around at it, the AC is able to make those adjustments, meaning that theoretically they're able to change anything about the camera from their remote station without needing an operator or someone else to reach out. So you still have features like run stop, but again, being able to change things like white balance on the fly is something that I think a lot of people can appreciate. And then also just having different options for like zoom, like this zoom rocker. It's more of a kind of pad. We call it a force pad. It's not just like zooming in or zooming out. There's a bit more of like a dampened tension to it, and having that fourth controller gives you the ability to adjust how slow or quick while you're zooming without losing control of a fourth motor. So it's I said, a lot of little things that kind of add to the user experience. Adjustable tension on the wheel. You can swap the wheel to different sides if you're prefer to operate on the left side. It's I think it's a very solid foundation for. I'm hoping more accessories in the future as well.
Very cool. Very cool. So the fourth wheel you have here, what kind of stuff can you operate with that?
So as I mentioned, speed is a pretty big one for the zoom rocker. You would previously have to use the iris style to control speed, which would only work if you weren't using a zoom lens. But we have been using this for our new electronic ND for the Mirage Pro without a motor. It directly communicates with the Mirage's END. However, we do still have motors for the previous variable NDs, both for Mirage Pro and the Mirage. So if you're using a Nano 2 motor to say, you can pull those motors with this and get that kind of seamless adjustment, which, as we've seen on some recent TV shows, can be very useful when doing long takes that you need.
Adolescents.
Yeah.
We were speculating about what ND they were using, and then somebody was like, "Oh, that's the Mirage." You're right.
Yeah, that may have been the first time I've seen it on the Ronin 4D, which is exciting. But yeah, this fully backwards compatible. It's going to integrate with that Mirage motor, with Nano 2, with Nucleus M, pretty much any of our wireless lens control systems. So. Yeah, controlling ND, controlling a polarizer is something people have been asking about. We make a 95 millimeter polarizer that can be controlled with this. Even if you're using, we have a rotatable tray for Mirage, you can put static filters in. If you're using like a star effect filter, you could then rotate that star effect with this or with any of these control options, just whatever feels more comfortable.
Very cool. Any changes about the motors? Like there's new motors?
Yeah, brand new motors. So they are a lot smaller. They are a bit more set up for gimbals and kind of lighter weight operating. Not exactly as small as the Nano 2, but a lot easier to work with something like the RS4 Pro than the old M. We now have the color LED indicators to let you easily see what motor number each is assigned to. The gears are swappable, so if you're using a lens where the rings are pretty close, you're able to move them on each side, kind of frees up some flexibility so you don't have to mount the motors on opposite sides if you don't want to. And then as well as just some small elements, the Nano 2 had it as well, but the kind of main motor driver is a little bit offset from the rod mount, which really helps the force not push the motor away from the lens. And I think a big one for anyone who used the Nucleus M previously is that the rod mounts are now 2 individual mounts, meaning instead of using a single one with bushings, they each are their own, and they're more kind of perfectly fine-tuned for the tension, so they're much less likely to strip and kind of be a bit more reliable.
Any changes about latency?
Latency has been improved. We say 0.02 seconds, so it's close to no latency, but we can't say that exactly. We can say it definitely is a bit more reliable of a connection. We have grown our 2.4G connection quite a bit, and I think you might not notice in every situation, but I think there's some situations where you'll notice the M or Nano may have stuttered a little bit, where the M2 is a bit more robust, bit more reliable of a connection.
The Tilta Nucleus ecosystem, I would say, is definitely, I would place it in the middle, right? It's not super high end. There's a lot more expensive systems on the market, but it's also not entry level per se. Maybe the Nano is. Where you're a camera assistant, right? So where would you see the biggest differences to the high end systems now?
That is a good question. I would say biggest difference like compared to the high end?
Yeah, I mean, where is there, is there still any reason to, go for a Preston or a C-Motion or whatever? Where is the biggest difference for you?
Yeah, I think they still do have, their place. I think something that I would be excited to see more in the future with the M2 is more integration with either, monitors. I know Teradek has that small HD integration a lot of people like. We do work very closely with DJI, so there's a possibility we might be able to integrate this with more of their stuff. But as of now, there is no integration with any monitors or external rangefinders. We do have some compatibility with the DJI focus motor via an RS gimbal. If you're using our wireless control module and the gimbal is set to control the motor, you can control the motor through it, but you couldn't natively connect it. So I think that's a big one. But I think for most ACs on most, either indie or, medium budget stuff, I think the Nucleus M2 is kind of more than enough for what a lot of people are looking for. And I think, again, where this software is starting, I think it has a lot of room to continue growing and innovating. So
I think a lot of people would want to see integration with the LiDAR, right, with the Focus Pro. But I guess DJI having their own follow focus system as well, it's not something that's immediately planned.
Yeah, not that I know of. I know people have been asking, and I know it would be interesting. We are obviously very friendly with DJI, so I don't think it's something where we're going to step on each other's toes. But I think this exists in a spot in between the Focus Pro. I think the Focus Pro, is a good system, and it excels in other ways. But I think in terms of having multiple motors and, kind of having a more universal option, I think they kind of both exist and kind of suit slightly different, user needs.
There are also still the handles, right, which is more a part of the package. Any differences on those?
So the handles are a bit more similar than they were. Similar to the FIZ, they now all run on the Sony F970 batteries, so it is a lot easier to power these systems, the handles especially. The 18650s, the old cells we used to.
Yeah, I love that you got rid of those.
They're a little bit difficult to find, and so the Sony batteries make it a lot easier. The handle screen is a little bit more updated, easier to see what is assigned to what. But I think the big thing with the handle is we now have a quick release for the thumb rocker, and so it lets you easily switch between both handle for, if the operator wants to zoom with their right thumb or their left thumb, where before you'd have to undo some screws, you'd have to mount it upside down. This kind of very easily lets you swap. And if you want to add a second one, you can then control the same 4 motors from the hand grip. So not as many updates with the handles, but I think for the people who are using them, they definitely will appreciate the differences.
Awesome. Anything else that's missing in terms of questions?
Yeah, I have a couple little things, in the firmware that I think people will be excited with in terms of shortcuts. It's pretty simple, for example, to switch between speed and your 4th motor control. We have options for quickly changing from the fastest zoom from more of a crash zoom to the slowest zoom. So a couple, things that I think the Nucleus M was missing in terms of user shortcuts. There'll be a pretty long list in the user guide that, people can check out. But yeah, as I mentioned, I think the system does not have any large new gimmicky feature, but it is a solid upgrade on almost every element that I think once you kind of get this in your hand and start playing around with it, I think you're going to, be pretty impressed and more likely than not want to integrate at least some parts of it into your existing system.
Awesome. Pricing, availability?
So right now we're taking pre-orders. The pre-order price is $12.99 US for the Ultimate Kit, which is the FIZ, 2 motors, 2 handles. We're going to be shipping in 4 to 8 weeks. That retail price is going to be $2,000, so it is a pretty significant discount if you get the pre-order in. And then we'll, of course, have different options for kits if you want to pick up just a motor, just the FIZ. But at the moment, I believe all we're selling is the motor kit, which is a single motor, and then the Ultimate Kit. But I imagine FIZ will be soon to come, as a lot of the features are built into the FIZ unit itself.
Could you combine the new FIZ with the old motors and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. New FIZ, old motors, old FIZ, any of the Mirage controllers, ring grip, everything kind of communicates on the same 2.4G frequency. So yeah, a lot of, kind of slow upgrading. If you want to try out a new motor, try out a new FIZ, you don't need to buy it all at once to take advantage of it.
That's great. Backwards compatibility. We love that. Awesome. Thank you, Nick.
Of course.
And yeah, thanks for watching. Stay tuned to CineD for a lot more videos. There's one more here from the Tilta booth here at NAB 2025 about their new batteries, and lots of other videos from NAB, of course. Stay tuned to CineD. Like and subscribe this video. Comment if you have questions. Let us know. We and the Tilta team, I'm sure, will be happy to answer anything that I missed to ask. Who knows? Thank you, Nick. Thanks for watching.